Good morning. Everybody enjoying the beautiful weather today compared to yesterday, huh? Boy, that was brutal coming from Southern California. A little bit about myself. I'm an ex-exec from Southern California Edison. Myself, retired about 7 years ago, continued in the industry as a consultant and trying to retire again. Um, so this conversation is going to be very, very interesting to me because we are at a time where there's new technologies and the business process behind those are really coming forward. Unfortunately, at the same time that the workforce is aging and skills may be passing them by. So we're going to talk about, and thanks for asking me to do this conversation, Jason. I don't know if it's because I'm one of those aging folks out of their workforce, but we've got a couple of great panelists with me today that I want to introduce. So ladies first, Tiffany Crowe. Tiffany currently serves as the Associate Chief Technology Officer for the District of Columbia. Her team focuses on the district's critical enterprise applications. Tiffany provides strategic direction and manages the teams responsible for the daily maintenance support, complex ad hoc, special project staffing, and the budget. So welcome and thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
On my left-hand side, your right, I want to introduce Mr. Robert Matthews. Robert is the Vice President, Talent and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Exelon. In this role, Robert is responsible for designing the enterprise-wide strategies that facilitate a diverse and inclusive environment. Please help me in welcoming Robert as well. All right, so with that said, we talked about the new technologies and aging workforce. Robert, I'll start with you because where I was taught in school and in business, never spend more money than you need to, than the problem is creating, right? So before we talk about this aging workforce and what we need to do to fill these gaps, do we have any idea of maybe how big a problem this is? What's the attrition rates? What are the skill gaps that maybe you're seeing at Exelon?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Pleasure being with you, Tiffany, you as well. And thank you, Jason, for bringing a good panel together. So yeah, I work at Exelon, as you mentioned. We are a T&D, or transmission distribution company. We service 10 million companies across country, Chicago, Pennsylvania. Sorry, let me get my cities right. Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, D.C., Wilmington, and Atlantic City. And so when we think about this issue in our company and in the country and across utilities in particular, CWD, or the Center for Energy Workforce Development, in its recent gap survey said that the retirement percentage right now stands at about 11%. And it has been stable at that over the last several years. And we've seen fewer in the last few years given issues around pandemic and so forth. And so people in the industry are working a little longer. We are just a little shy of that at 8% right now at Exelon. If we did nothing over the next 5 years, that 8% would become 18% over 5 years or so. So it's a reasonable concern, and it's a concern that we see increasing and on the horizon. So it's important to get ahead of it. It's important to be thinking about the people, the technology, and the processes that are involved in that. So I think it's a manageable thing today, but something that is clear in the data that we need to be paying attention to.
Perfect. I think that's pretty close to the same stats when I left Edison. I think we were somewhere between, it varies 12 and 14%. So that is a manageable number, but I totally agree with you. It's one that you have to stay ahead of, or that curve changes real quickly. Tiffany, a T&D company, from a city perspective, are you seeing the same types of numbers?
Well, I think, our attrition rates and age of the workforce is not quite as public in certain scenarios, but we are seeing that a lot of agencies, the average age is around 55, which, that's still prime working age. Those are ages where we expect folks to continue working and enjoy having them in the workforce, but it also means that we have to start thinking about the future, right? So in 10 years or less in some cases, are we going to be able to backfill those positions? Have we thought about strategic planning around how we bring those folks to the point of working with new processes and new technologies if they've been in the same roles for quite a while? So I think our attrition rates are significantly lower, particularly for retirement, than the private sector. But it is something that we have to think about, and ways to make sure that when it's time to retire, our teams are comfortable doing that, and that we're ready for those valuable workers to move on. So.
All right, well, great, thanks. And I want to point out something that you mentioned, and I want to make sure we also talk about during our conversations. We talked about attrition rates and maybe filling a pipeline, but you talked about upskilling some of the current workforce as well to maybe take on some new roles, and I think we'll get back to that. But Robert, let me go back to you. When we talk about replacing this aging workforce and filling our resource pipeline, what are you and or Exelon or maybe even the industry, what are we looking at in terms of maybe some untapped resources to help fill that pipeline?
Thanks, Mark, again. And I wanted to clarify from my original question, the stats that I was describing, both from the survey and within Exelon, is the percentage of the workforce that's retirement eligible.
Okay.
So the 8% internally that could increase over time, as well as what the 11% in the survey. So that gives you the sense of where you're vulnerable, who could choose to leave, and then the variables that impact that. I think the fundamental issue for the utility industry, and to some degree the energy industry more broadly, is that there are resources that are untapped. And I'll be clear, they're largely untapped because the industry has been historically a white male industry. And so people of color and women, for the most part, have not been invited to be a part of it. And so some of it is embedded in the history of our company and, history of our country, and therefore companies like it and communities and so forth. So I think there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion angle on this. Where are there communities who lack the awareness of the opportunities in the industry and lack the access? And so I think companies have to, and what Exelon is doing and where Exelon is leading in the workforce development space, for example, is we are looking at addressing economic inequities in communities. So people of color and women who have not been a part of the industry have also been, from an economic standpoint, disadvantaged. And so they remain underserved and under-resourced. And so we're addressing that head on by trying to bring these opportunities, these family supporting roles into those communities by making them aware, and bringing training academies like the DC Infrastructure Academy, for example, that Exelon and PEPCO and others do with DC government, that have training academies that are focused on developing the training requirements for these family supporting careers and jobs, and then providing that training, the training necessary, the wraparound services that are necessary, so that these individuals can compete and be trained and be ready to compete and to obtain the job. So there's an untapped source of talent, and they are in many ways unemployed, in some cases underemployed, and it's an opportunity for the industry to connect and to train a workforce that could help to fill those pipelines.
Love that. Love that. Training academies. And you know, I think the sooner and the younger you can get to these folks, the better, right?
Yeah.
So congrats on that. Tiffany, the District of Columbia, some thoughts around untapped talent? Are you seeing some of the same things, maybe some of the same programs, training?
Yes, and I think, from our perspective, we have to attack the challenge from both ends, right? So sort of getting younger workers, and I'll speak specifically about technology and technology as it relates to government and cities, and sort of governing in the public sector using technology and process improvements. So that means partnering with local schools, and DC is very fortunate in that there are so many universities around here as well, where we can think about people who would not normally have considered government and technology within government, to show them that, look, we have the resources to train you, to create a pipeline. If you don't want to stay in government forever, maybe you start here, you get your training here, you fill valuable roles in the government while we're doing new things, and then build your career. And similarly, at the start of the pandemic, there were a lot of people who did not believe that we could take a workforce that had maybe not necessarily been as technologically savvy as people would have wanted in certain areas, and went 100% remote for a period of time. And the same individuals who would prefer to walk over to your desk to have a conversation about something than send an email were having virtual meetings and sharing screens and using technologies for workflow that were completely digitized. And so those things required training, they required process updates, and they allowed us to show our workforce that there were skills to be learned. And a lot of people moved into new roles after that, right? Because they had new skills that they hadn't tapped before. And so I think that's something that we've learned from and are doing at a larger level now, intentionally. So.
Okay, that's great, because I think we touched on it. Did you have something?
I do, but go ahead. I wanted to acknowledge that I went 2 questions before I went off script, so I just wanted to.
Oh,
2 whole questions.
that's okay. Because this was a great segue, because I'm going to ask you both. We talked about the training, and maybe let's get a little deeper into not just the aging workforce, but with the new technologies in the process changes that those bring. And the group before us was talking about, the Internet of Things and all these devices, whether it's in a city's network or Exelon's grid network, sure. that really require us to have new skills. I'll start with you, maybe sure. On the Exelon side. Do you see that also as a driver for some of this upskilling? And is that upskilling part of the training academy, or is it more internally you've got to focus on those skills?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's both. Okay. I conceive it in at times thinking about origination and destination. So the origination point, as I mentioned, are the communities that we're talking about that have in many ways been untapped, remain under-resourced and underserved. So that's the origination point, right? And it's critical that we are aware of what those communities are. Certainly in the cities where Exelon serves here in the district, I think Ward 7 and 8 in particular, the destination, it varies, and there are options there. So you've got from a utility standpoint, you've got craft jobs, right? These are your linemen, line workers. That is a source. You have some that require some post-secondary education, that are your technicians or your engineering techs and so forth. Then you have your jobs that require 4-year degrees and more in some of the STEM fields. So the origination is common. important, but the destination varies. And in terms of the new skills that are there, we think about the renewable technicians and the renewable work, the renewables and so forth that are in play, and the skills required to do that. Again, a new destination, but the origination point remains the same. And so we've got a lot of opportunities there. And so some of it comes through the infrastructure academies that I mentioned. Some of it is happening in skilling up incumbent and internal workers. And then some of it is as we're connecting externally with universities and community colleges and the like. You can develop those academies to feed right into those jobs, the current one and the new ones as well.
Well, that's perfect. That sounds like an all-encompassing approach. And I'll throw that also out to you, Tiffany. Are there areas where maybe some of these skill gaps because of technology are driving your decisions and how you train and what you train on? And are there programs in place for that?
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of it happened informally over the past 2 years, where a lot of us had been trying for several years, even before the pandemic, to encourage the use of technologies, to make sure that jobs that previously had been pen and paper, something as basic as that, was now like you use your iPad and you are able to use documents digitized to send things in a way that hadn't been done. Like those examples where it was sort of like, that's a best practice, that's optional, became mandatory, right? So now, as a part of everyone's training, we teach them how to use the things that are going to make our jobs easier and more efficient, while also gathering information from them about why things were done a certain way, so that they feel supported in sort of the changes that are coming, right? So that's part of the training, is making sure people know, look, even though we are changing the way we are doing something, or the destination of your job is not what you thought it was going to be, you're still a part of the team. We need you, and we plan to move together into what's next for the city. So.
That's great, and I think, maybe I can leverage that. It's a great segue in. And it almost brings us back to something you said earlier, Robert, about working with the academies and with the universities, because when you talk about filling that pipeline, you're talking about a competition for resources, right? So there's only so many resources, and everybody usually wants the same group of folks that can really bring something to the table. I'm going to throw out there for you and ask the question, what is it about our industry being the energy industry, or smart cities, city of the future type industry? What advice or what would you say to some of the folks that you're recruiting out there? What would you say to them to encourage joining our industry, as opposed to, and I apologize to the Google fellow that was here. What would you say to attract them to our industry as opposed to a Google?
He had a pretty cool title, the Chief Internet Evangelist. That was pretty cool.
Only Google.
Yeah. So this ruins my whole strategy of following up on Tiffany's answers by making me go first each time. So there goes that. I think one of the things that are important to me is that it's not just about the job that we have to offer and the meaningful work. I mean, I think about the work that our company does, particularly in cases of storm and severe weather, right? Critical work to make sure folks are able to stay warm, and critical services are being able to be provided. It's life-changing work. It's really meaningful work, but that's just a part of who we are, right? We diversity, equity, and inclusion is a core value of ours. It's a business imperative. How we endear and connect with and treat communities that we serve in is critical. We strive to be connected to our communities by more than just our power lines. And so the issues that exist in community are the issues that we take on. And so a part of our value proposition is that we do meaningful work. We have, competitive comp and benefits, but we address important causes in community. And so when we think about racial and social justice, when we think about helping those in need, how we ensure equity in how we approach our work. One thing that the CWD study pointed out was that in our industry, the workforce over the last many years has gotten younger, and also non-retirement attrition is attributed mostly to younger employees. And so the dynamic is what's important to a new generation of workers is not just the pay, not just the benefits, not just the job, but what does the company stand for? Where will it lend its voice to issues when things are public policy and even in the political sphere? Will the company have a voice? Does the company speak up? And so my invitation is we've got great jobs, meaningful work, competitive comp and benefits, and we are about supporting, uplifting communities, because we can't do the work we do in the energy transition and leave communities behind, and we can't lift certain communities and leave certain neighborhoods behind. So it's our cause to do the work. That's important. That's a part of our invitation to come work with us.
Very well said. Thank you. Tiffany, again, private sector, from a city government perspective, what would the attraction be? What would you say to folks?
Well, now I have to go off script because he stole my answer, right? Like, that's the beauty of government, is that we are in the communities, so, but I will go off a little bit. So most of my career has been in the public sector. I did Teach for America right out of college, and then have moved through different public organizations. And every once in a while I will look, every job I have, I always kind of look to see what's out there, just read job descriptions, see what's interesting to me, even if I am loving the job that I have, which is most of the time, but just to see, like, okay, is there something else that would be interesting to me? And what I have found almost universally to be true is that the job that I'm in is more interesting than anything that I've seen, right? So whether the compensation is different in a different opportunity, the work that I'm doing is interesting, it's dynamic, it gives me freedom to be innovative and also recruit other people to do the same thing, right? Because what I have found, folks that no one would believe that we could get to come to government or come to a challenged organization would come because they believe that they can make a difference in what they're doing. And not just like making a difference in the community or in the world, but making a difference because their skills are what we need. And so that is part of the pitch that we give, is we need you, not just because you have a degree from GW or you worked at Google or wherever, it's because you have a specific set of skills that we need to fill this gap in order to accomplish this for the city or for the organization. And that works, especially because we don't tell people that they have to stay forever, right? Like maybe you're here for 5 years and then you move on. And knowing that that is sort of the workforce now, folks are not staying in jobs for 30 years. Right. They're moving along when they find something else that's more interesting, or the comp is better, or they want to move to Austin, and they go where their passion takes them. And so we really just try to get people to spend some of their time with us.
I think that's perfect. And, just to maybe add, one of the things I found that I was really surprised about, having been in the energy industry for almost 40 years, is with the new technology. I mean, you get to actually play and try out and increase productivity and efficiency with some new technology. And people don't normally think of, getting to play with new toys and technology in this kind of industry, but you really do, and it's just going to grow even more. So I appreciate those insights. Plug if you want, if there's GW students out there that want to get to know the industry or join an academy, your chance to say reach out at this email or this URL. Anything you want to plug?
Yes. You can go to octo.dc.gov. You can also, and Octo is Office of the Chief Technology Officer. We are actually launching a total revamp of the city services through dc.gov. So all of the city's websites we're revamping to make the city totally digital. So we go to Twitter, you can find us there, and the team is super responsive in that through that channel. And so if you're interested in working with us, we will reach right back out that way. You can also email me. My email is just my first name, last name at dc.gov. So thank you so much.
I'll give you the same opportunity.
Sure, thank you, Mark. I'm going to check out your website.
We all are.
Yeah. Pepco.com, you can search there for careers. It's the way you'll find jobs local to the district, but also you can look at the sites and the job opportunities for our sister companies as well. So Exelon.com, ExelonCorp.com, or Pepco.com will get you there.
Okay, perfect. I hope you guys wrote those down. I'm going to, with the last few minutes, I'm going to open it up to any questions that some of you might have. We have, from what I could see, one hand raised out there.
Great panel. Thank you very much for the time and insights. Question is in regards to the energy sector. A confluence of two primary things are coming together. We have the electrification of buildings, and then we also have the IRA pumping a lot of money to households interested in potentially electrifying their households. What is Exelon doing in terms of training contractors as well as training homeowners in terms of the questions to ask of those contractors to ensure that they can transition seamlessly and effectively and affordably across the spectrum for all homeowners to go ahead and allow them to tap into electric heat pumps and all the incentives that are out there through the IRA? Thanks.
Thank you. Good question. One of our focuses to ensure that as we move, into the transition, energy transition, is to ensure that we do so through an equity lens, and recognizing that our customers vary in terms of income size and family size and home sizes and so forth. So our customer organization is working diligently, and we see it as our responsibility to ensure that we're educating our customers in that space. And so both our customer organization and our community organizations that partner together in our education sessions with community, as we're doing community outreach, it's a part of here's what the opportunities are, here's where you can take advantage of these resources, and here are the things to keep in mind as you do it. And for our part, the most critical thing is ensuring that we're doing so with the appropriate equity focus. Thanks for the question.
We have about 30 seconds left. Is there any other questions out there?
Of the future, do you see? And you talked about new tools and everything, Mark. I was just wondering, Robert, what you might think about that in terms of just new careers on the horizon.
Yeah, I think we're experiencing similar careers where there's different approaches to it. In other words, it's not so much the what, but how we approach it. We use drones, for example, to go places that we haven't been able to go and see before, or to do so more safely. How we examine what happens as we're digging trenches and so forth. So some of it is leveraging technology to do the work in more efficient and safe ways. And so certainly opportunities around new careers, but even we're reimagining how we're approaching some of the current careers as well.
Well, thank you very much. Our time flew by. I really appreciate the chat with both of you. Tiffany, thank you. Robert, thank you. And thanks to you all out there, and have a great rest of your day.